At 5 o'clock local time, the steel beneath the carrier's flight deck vibrates with a steady, familiar hum as the ship carves a clean path through open water. The sea is calm. The wind over the bow is steady. Deck crews move with the kind of rhythm that only comes from repetition and discipline. Aircraft sit parked, secured, and waiting. Nothing in this moment hints that anything is about to change. Then the atmosphere shifts. Inside the Combat Information Center, a radar operator straightens as a new return appears at the outer edge of the scope. Fast, low, clean. No transponder, no flight plan, constant bearing, speed rising, unknown air contact. The words are delivered in a flat professional tone and logged without drama. On the bridge, the officer of the deck does not react immediately. He does not have to. The ship's systems are already delivering every critical detail. Altitude is dropping. Closure rate is increasing. This is not civilian traffic. This is not a simple navigational mistake. This is deliberate. Confirmed track, the captain says, calm and measured. Confirmed. Single aircraft, low observable profile. 5 seconds later, another voice breaks in. Visual in 3, 2... The shadow reaches the deck before the sound does. A dark shape cuts across the sky, impossibly low and moving faster than instinct can fully process. The roar comes a split second later, deep and raw, shaking loose gear and sending waves of exhaust across the parked aircraft. Sailors pause mid-step as the jet flashes directly over the landing area, and then it is past. But everyone on board knows what they just saw. A Russian Su-57. No warning, no radio call, no change in course. Just a direct pass over one of the most protected ships at sea. On the deck, no one runs, no one shouts. That matters. Maintain stations, the captain says, his voice unchanged. Inside the CIC, the response begins, not outwardly, but internally. More screens come alive, tracks sharpen, sensors align. The ship does not respond with emotion, it responds through structure. Condition 3. The order moves through the ship. Key stations are set and manned. Systems come fully awake. Not to engage, but to observe. The Su-57 appears again on sensors, already widening its arc. It has not left. It is circling. Electro-optical systems lock on. Infrared signatures spread across the displays. Every angle, every heat fluctuation, every subtle movement of the control surfaces is captured. This is not about intimidation here. It is about information. On the bridge, the captain keeps his eyes on the horizon rather than the sky. He understands exactly what this is. The flyover was no accident. It was a probe, a test of reaction, discipline, and posture. The carrier does not alter course. That choice carries weight. The Su-57 comes around again, lower this time and on a tighter line. Still no radio call, still no acknowledgement. The aircraft wants to be seen. It wants a visible response. It does not get one. Instead, the carrier strike group tightens in ways that cannot be seen from the outside. Radar coverage overlaps. Passive sensors listen. Nothing is transmitted unless it must be. No systems are displayed openly. No alarms break the air. Everything remains controlled. Inside the CIC, a systems officer speaks without lifting his eyes from the display. Signature capture ongoing. Flight envelope mapping stable. This is the part most people never witness. Every second the aircraft remains nearby, it gives something away. Heat, shape, motion, the details stealth can never fully conceal once distance collapses. The closer it comes, the more it reveals. The Su-57 banks, rolling just enough to show intent without crossing too far. It is now close enough for sailors topside to make out the angular fuselage, the dull surface catching sunlight for only an instant. The aircraft is undeniably powerful. But power and control are not the same thing. On deck, a yellow shirt raises a hand slowly, signaling a pause in movement. Not out of fear, but because discipline requires it. The ship will not appear unsettled. Below deck, every detail is marked and time-stamped. Bearing, altitude, speed, behavior, nothing is missed. Long after the aircraft is gone, this encounter will still exist in the record. The Su-57 eases upward, pulling slightly back on the throttle. It lingers at the edge of the carrier's sensor range just long enough to make certain it has been noticed. Then it turns away. No gesture, no dramatic final pass, just a clean break toward open sky. The sound fades. The shadow is gone. Wind and water reclaim the scene. On the carrier, work resumes almost immediately. Chains clatter again, sailors move, flight crews return to their tasks. To someone watching from a distance, it might seem as though nothing happened. But something did happen. A message was sent, and something even more valuable was gathered. The aircraft does not fully leave the area. It climbs, but not far. It widens its turns, but does not disappear. On radar, its track settles into a steady arc, deliberate and controlled. This is no brief pass meant only to create noise. It is a presence designed to remain. Inside the Combat Information Center, nobody talks about intimidation. That word has no use here. What matters is geometry. Track holding, a watch officer reports. Altitude increasing, speed steady. The Su-57 remains close enough to matter and close enough to be useful. Across the strike group, sensors are already synchronized. Not aggressively, quietly. Passive systems listen while active ones stay disciplined. This is not a lock. This is collection. Every aircraft reveals something in flight. Heat gathers at exhaust points. Fine vibrations ripple through control surfaces. Angles shift under pressure. At this range, stealth stops being an idea and becomes a calculation. Electro-optical cameras follow the aircraft through the clear sky. Infrared systems map its thermal pattern across different power settings. Radar tracks its movement without announcing itself. The Su-57 knows it is being observed. What it does not realize is how completely. On the bridge, the captain stands still, hands behind his back, eyes forward. He understands the balance. Any visible reaction, any obvious change in posture would reward the provocation. That is exactly what the aircraft is looking for. It does not get it. Continue data collection, he says. The Su-57 drops lower once more, approaching from an offset angle this time, rather than directly overhead. It is testing lateral coverage, searching for weak points. There are none. Below deck, analysts begin building a profile in real time. Flight path consistency, turn rates, acceleration curves. The pilot's movements are precise, controlled, and measured. That says plenty on its own. This pilot is confident, and confidence creates patterns. At this distance, the carrier systems can study how the jet behaves during sustained proximity, how long it can hold a line, how quickly it corrects, how sharply it banks when it knows it is being tracked. These details matter. The Su-57's engines flare briefly as it adjusts position, only a small burst of extra thrust. To an untrained eye, it means nothing. To the infrared feed, it is a clear data point. Thermal spike logged, a technician says quietly. Every flare, every correction, every decision becomes part of the picture. None of it is emotional. None of it is personal. This is not about pride. It is about understanding. The aircraft makes another pass along the edge of the strike group's coverage. Still no radio contact, still no transponder. The silence is intentional. But silence is not invisibility. The carrier systems are built for far more demanding situations than this. They track threats moving at extreme speed just above the waterline. They are designed to manage confusion and pressure. By comparison, a single fighter in clear weather is something they can read with precision. On the flight deck, crews continue working under tight control. Every movement is deliberate. No one looks up unless they need to. The ship refuses to advertise attention. That composure is intentional. The Su-57 drops lower once again, leaning harder against the boundary. This is the point where a weaker force might flinch, where alarms might erupt, where weapons might visibly shift into place. None of that happens. Instead, a calm confirmation moves through the CIC. Full envelope capture achieved. That line carries more weight than any open warning ever could. The aircraft has remained close long enough to expose its patterns, its reactions to observation, its operating comfort, and the edges of its performance. Every major system aboard the carrier and its escorts now understands more about the jet than it did an hour earlier. The Su-57 begins to open its turn. The pilot got what he came for, or at least believes he did. From his side of the story, he passed low over a carrier and departed without challenge. That version will sound impressive when repeated. What he cannot see are the logs being completed, the files being secured, and the quiet precision of a force that never had to reveal its full capability. The carrier never altered course. That matters too. As the aircraft moves farther out, its signature starts to fade from the most sensitive sensors. Not all at once, not cleanly, but enough to confirm the departure path. Contact increasing range, the watch officer reports. The captain gives a single nod. Maintain course. No one celebrates. No one talks about winning. This was never a showdown. It was an exchange, and the carrier leaves it holding far more than it had at the start. The sea remains calm. The sky settles back into clear blue. To anyone observing from a distance, the entire event would seem almost uneventful. But below deck, in the quiet compartments where the real work happens, the encounter is already being reviewed frame by frame. The low pass was the visible moment. The information gathered was the real story. And that story is just getting started. The Su-57 does not fully withdraw. It adjusts. On the scopes, the contact changes altitude and bearing with deliberate care, lingering at the edge of proximity without stepping into a direct violation. This is no longer just a display. It is a silent negotiation. Inside the Combat Information Center, posture tightens, but nothing spills outward. This is where doctrine matters most. Contact maintaining parallel track, a watchstander reports. Range stable. The carrier holds its course. Speed unchanged. Wind over the deck remains constant. That decision is deliberate. In naval terms, it removes ambiguity. No movement can be misread as a reaction. The answer is not a maneuver. It is a system. Across the strike group, coordination deepens out of sight. Data streams merge. Timelines align. Sensors that have remained passive begin cross-checking quietly, without calling attention to themselves. The ship does not announce readiness. It lives it. On the bridge, the captain leans slightly toward the display, studying the geometry. He is not focused on the aircraft itself. He is focused on the space between choices. "Keep it clean," he says. Below, air controllers quietly refine the airspace buffer, not to block the aircraft, but to shape the picture. If the jet moves closer, it will enter a space that is already understood, already documented, already controlled by procedure. That is the paradox of command. The less you display, the more firmly you hold. The Su-57 banks again, tighter this time. Its turn radius narrows. The jet is probing for lateral response, waiting for the instant when restraint becomes action. It never comes. Instead, another layer enters the picture. Far beyond visual range, an Allied aircraft changes altitude. Not toward the Su-57, not away from it, but just enough to alter the geometry and make one thing clear. The jet is not alone in the sky. The message is subtle. It is not delivered by voice. It is delivered by positioning. Inside the CIC, a systems officer speaks quietly. "Air picture normalized. No conflict vectors." That sentence marks a threshold. The moment has shifted from uncertainty to control. The Su-57 holds its position for several long seconds, long enough to decide whether to push harder, long enough to understand that the reaction it came to provoke is not coming. This is the point where escalation usually begins, and the point where it stops. On the flight deck, no one looks up. That detail matters. Sailors trust the system because the system has earned that trust. Panic would suggest weakness. Even visible attention would hand the aircraft exactly what it wants. The jet dips slightly, then climbs again. A pause, a trace of hesitation, a human decision inside a machine designed to project dominance. The carrier remains still. That silence is the answer. Behind the scenes, the recording never stops. Timestamps continue to roll. Every deviation is marked. Every second adds definition. The Su-57 is now fully profiled, not only by shape, but by behavior. This is the side of modern conflict most people never see. No blasts, no shouted commands, just a quiet, relentless accumulation of certainty. The aircraft begins to widen its arc. Still near, but no longer committed. The pilot has read the space and found no weakness to exploit. On the bridge, the captain speaks again. Let him go. Not because he has to, because he chooses to. The Su-57 turns more decisively now, angling away from the strike group's center line. Its speed increases, not sharply, but enough to make the exit unmistakable. Contact breaking, CIC reports. Increasing range. The carrier does not acknowledge the move. It has no reason to. Afterward, nothing changes on the surface. Operations continue. Deck cycles resume. Radios remain controlled. From the outside, the ship appears exactly as it did before. Steady, unbothered, unchanged. But the response already happened. It happened in the discipline to hold course, in the refusal to perform for an audience, in the confidence to let a provocation spend itself. The Su-57 disappears into the distance, carrying a version of the event it likely believes it owns. It does not, because the real answer was never meant for the sky. It was meant for the record. And now that record exists, complete, exact, and impossible to soften. The carrier continues forward, outwardly unchanged, changed only in what it now knows. The encounter ends without incident, which is exactly how the Navy prefers it. Because when control is absolute, silence is not hesitation, it is authority. The jet is still visible, too far to pose any immediate risk, yet not distant enough to ignore. A small fading shape against the upper sky, now followed more out of routine than necessity. The Su-57's exit is steady and deliberate, carefully avoiding any impression of retreat. On the carrier, nothing marks the moment. No announcement, no visible shift. The ship does not relax because situations like this are not over when an aircraft turns away. They end only when everything returns to normal. Inside the Combat Information Center, operators continue tracking long after the distance begins to grow. Not out of doubt, but out of discipline. Encounters end the same way they begin. Precisely. Range increasing, a voice reports. Altitude high, track steady. The Su-57 is climbing now, settling into a departure profile that signals disengagement. No sudden movements, no aggressive maneuvers. The pilot understands the moment has passed. What he may not fully understand is what was exchanged. On the bridge, the captain remains composed. He doesn't follow the aircraft with his eyes. His focus stays on continuity, making sure nothing about the carrier's behavior shifts under outside pressure. That consistency is not passive, it is intentional. Flight operations return to full pace. Yellow shirts guide aircraft into position. Chains are checked again. Engines begin to spool. To an outside observer, the carrier appears untouched by the event. That impression is by design. Below deck, however, the real work is just beginning. Data streams recorded during the encounter are now being verified. Timestamps aligned, redundancies cross-checked. This is where a brief flyover becomes a lasting reference. Every system that observed the Su-57 now compares results. Radar tracks align with infrared imagery. Optical feeds are matched with motion analysis. Nothing is rushed. Precision matters more than speed. This isn't reaction, it's collection. The Su-57 continues to fade, now well beyond visual range. On sensors, its signature weakens, then stabilizes. It has committed to leaving. Contact at extended range, CIC confirms. No further maneuvers. The captain nods once. Log it. That single instruction closes the operational phase, but opens another. Because while the sky clears, the meaning of the encounter remains. This moment won't live as a dramatic story or a loud headline. It will live in systems, in training, in quiet updates that will remember this aircraft long after the pilot has landed. On deck, a sailor wipes residue from his gloves and goes back to work. He won't talk about the flyover later, not because he can't, but because to him, it was routine. That too is control. The Su-57 is now just a distant mark, barely noticeable on the scope. The strike group resumes its steady rhythm, unchanged in presence. No warnings were broadcast, no visible reaction given, no display of force, and yet the result is clear. The aircraft came close, looked for a response, and left without one. In modern naval operations, that's not a stalemate. That's a conclusion. Back on the bridge, the captain allows himself a brief glance at the horizon. The sea remains calm. The sky is clear again. The carrier continues forward, unchanged in direction or purpose. The moment has passed. The lesson remains. Power doesn't always announce itself, it doesn't always move or respond. Sometimes it simply holds steady, confident in its systems, its timing, and its discipline. The Su-57 left believing it tested a boundary. What it actually did was confirm one, and that boundary never shifted. The sky stretches blue and uninterrupted once more, broken only by routine aircraft patterns and faint trails marking a return to normal operations. To the outside world, the encounter is already over. On board, it has only changed form. Inside the CIC, a new watch takes over. Fresh eyes study the same data. Not because anything was missed, but because repetition builds certainty. Every sensor feed has been preserved, every second logged. Time, bearing, altitude, speed, nothing assumed, nothing discarded. This is where encounters truly end, not in the air, but in analysis. Radar engineers compare return signatures across multiple bands, confirming how the aircraft appeared under different conditions. Infrared specialists study thermal patterns, tracking engine behavior through subtle power changes. Optical analysts review high-resolution frames, isolating small movements in control surfaces that only become visible at close range. Each group works separately. Then the results come together. No raised voices, no rushed conclusions. This is not performance. This is precision designed to last long after memory fades. On the bridge, the captain signs the final log entry. The wording is simple, factual, stripped of anything unnecessary, no embellishment, because only facts endure. The carrier continues on its assigned course. Speed steady, formation intact, predictable but controlled. That predictability is not weakness, it's stability by design. Below deck, secure data packages are finalized and transmitted through channels that don't rely on urgency. There is no rush. What was collected will not lose value with time. In fact, it becomes more useful the longer it is studied. This is the unseen side of deterrence. Not spectacle, not confrontation. Memory. Somewhere far away, the Su-57 pilot will land and report what he experienced. A low pass, no reaction. A carrier that did not respond. That version of events will spread, but it will always be incomplete. Because the pilot cannot know what was captured. He cannot measure how much was revealed, how many variables were tested, how many unknowns became known in just a few minutes. He approached to show presence. He left having revealed pattern. On the carrier, there is no sense of victory. Sailors don't gather to discuss it. They return to routine with quiet confidence in systems that have proven themselves again. That balance is what matters. Restraint without capability is weakness. Capability without restraint is risk. True control exists between the two. This encounter may never be publicly acknowledged. It may never appear in headlines. That, too, is intentional. Advantage does not require attention. It requires consistency. As evening approaches, the carrier's lights adjust. Watches rotate. Aircraft continue their cycles. The sea remains unchanged. Beyond the horizon, other aircraft are flying. Other ships are moving. Other moments are waiting. This one is complete. The Su-57 came close, expecting a reaction. It found discipline instead. It searched for noise and met silence. And within that silence, something lasting was created. Not just a memory, but a reference. Because the most decisive moments are not the ones that end loudly. They are the ones where one side understands far more than the other and chooses not to say it. The carrier moves forward, unchanged in course, but sharper in knowledge, ready for the next moment when the sky tests what already knows how to wait.